What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Whole Lawyer, the podcast where we explore the people behind the profession. I'm your host, Akeem Earle, and every episode we sit down with attorneys, judges, legal professionals, and change makers to have honest conversations about the law, purpose, identity, and the journeys that shape who they are beyond the courtroom. If you enjoy conversations like this, please be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. You can find The Whole Lawyer on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Now, today I am honored to welcome Tracy L. Simmons to the pod. Tracy is the Associate Dean of Admissions and Student Affairs at Howard University School of Law and has spent more than 2 decades helping shape the future of the legal profession. Throughout her career, she has led admissions, financial aid, diversity, and student affairs at several law schools and served in national leadership roles with organizations like LSAC, AALS, and CLEO. And she has dedicated her career to expanding access to legal education and mentoring the next generation of lawyers. She has also authored the second edition of Law School for Dummies and is currently co-authoring Critical Race Theories for Dummies. Today, we are talking about what really goes into law school admissions, the biggest misconceptions applicants have, how future lawyers can stand out, and the responsibility of building a legal profession that reflects the community it serves. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to The Whole Lawyer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Excited to
Of
be here.
course. Of course. I also want to give a shout out to Shala for making the connection. Shala has been amazing in my legal profession. So, yeah.
She's an amazing human who
Mm-hmm.
connects a lot of dots for a lot of people.
Yep. Yep. So shout out, this is dedicated to you. Just shout out to you. Shout out
Yes,
to you.
absolutely.
All right. So Tracy, the opening question for The Whole Lawyer is, if I was not, in your case, a law school admissions counselor and 30
Mhm.
years in the legal profession, I would be a what?
I would be well, hmm. One, I would either be some type of like travel guru who was traveling on other people's dimes and basically evaluating hotels, restaurants,
Mm,
uh, and all that good stuff. Or I would be some type of like sports liaison, life coach, person for people coming out of college into specifically professional football and basketball, but maybe even now as I'm learning to love soccer more and even hockey,
yeah.
just because I feel like there's just all these missing pieces that when I watch some of these athletes, I just wish they had someone that was connecting all the dots for them, in terms of really thinking through their contracts and thinking through their image and thinking through how to be there for their families, especially the first gen ones, while also ensuring that, in 3 years or 20 years, they have money to live on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always think about like, I would love to be kind of that bridge between what I somehow think is missing between the agents and the coaches and the mentors,
Yeah.
and so I know random, I know, but
No, that's really
yeah,
dope. That's
that's
really dope. So it's either like an influencer or like a sports manager,
uh-huh, all
agent.
over the place, all over the place.
No,
I'm very much a
I love it.
Sagittarius.
No, I love it. I love it. It's
Uh,
interesting enough. Whenever I ask people in the profession that question, sports come up a lot, either like sports journalist or coach or sports, just playing the sport. I don't know. There's some connection between law and sports.
well,
Like
don't
that's
you think
people's
so
like,
though? Like, don't you think
mm-hmm,
I mean, I feel like sports serve a lot of different purposes, and I think, in terms of like team structures and in terms of
mm-hmm,
discipline and focus and
yeah,
dreams and being hopeful and optimistic because so many people don't make it to that level, and
true.
so
Yeah.
yeah, I could see that.
No, I love that. No, that's real. That's absolutely real. And so you can tell me if I'm wrong. You kind of do that in your full time job, where you're bridging the gap between what you feel like law students are missing and helping them out along their journey. Break down about what you do right now.
Yeah, so I feel like part of what I do is help people understand a little bit about why they're pursuing a law degree. Like, I think it's super important that this is something that a person chooses for themselves. um It's too hard, it's too expensive, it's too emotionally draining to do it just because someone else wants to do it or because you don't have something else to do. And so I
Yeah.
think part of my job is educating people about the fact that they can do it because I get a lot of applicants who are being told, because they're first gen, because of their gender, because of their language skills, because of their ability status that they can't do it. So I feel like part of my job is to help them see that they can. Two, I think another part of my job is just communicating that there's so many things you can do with this degree. Like I think that um the narrative that's out there in the universe sometimes is that lawyers are just all sharks and or they're just in the courtroom all day doing criminal stuff. And it's like that's
Yeah.
just not it. Like, you have this really huge opportunity to be with people on their best or their worst days. And so I
Yeah.
love to be able to work in like the pipeline space with, K through 12 folks or even junior college, community college folks to get them to see why they should consider a law degree. Because I really do think there's just tons of options out there. And
Mhm.
the last thing I would say would be that I think part of my other job is really to help people understand and break down the process so that it's manageable because I think
Yeah.
it can be overwhelming and it can be intimidating. But if you break it down, slow it down, just take it for what it is and kind of create a checklist of some sort or a list of some sort, I feel like most people can manage it way better than they expected. And they will find
Mhm.
themselves on the other side of it being happier with the results if they kind of take the time and slow down and think through it.
Yeah. Why should people go to law school?
I think you have to want to further educate yourself and you want to have to change things. I mean, and whether that be that you want to change policies as it relates to student athletes, or whether it's
Mhm.
that you want to change policies around family and adoption law, or whether you want to create policies for small business owners, or
Mhm.
you want to change, international treaty laws, related to human rights
Yeah.
or water rights or things of that nature. Like you have to want to do something that's going to impact your community, a business, a cause in some way. I do think personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with people wanting to go to law school because they want to change the generational wealth of their family. I think
Mhm.
it's an advanced degree for a reason. It is costly for a reason, and there's a reason that people really don't function in our society without lawyers and judges. And so I think you should go to law school if you wanna have an impact in a very different way on society. I mean, and that could be, historically in terms of constitutional law, or it could be, something as simple as, real estate and construction law and redlining and understanding the rules that
Mhm.
pertain to banking and how they impact, more impoverished communities versus wealthy communities and things of that nature. So, I just think
Yeah.
you don't have to know exactly what type of law you want to practice, but you definitely need to know that you're willing to work hard and that you're actually open to learning a very different way of thinking, writing, speaking in some instances, and backing up facts with evidence. Like if you're someone, I get all the time like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I was told I was a good arguer when I was a kid, so that's why I went to law school." It's like that's not it. Like you need more than that to get through law school and to be a successful attorney, judge,
Yeah.
etc. So, yeah.
I would say about 70% of the attorneys I've had on, that was their origin story. Somebody told them that they're good at arguing, so they pursued,
I've
including
seen
me. So
thousands and thousands of personal statements that say something similar, and I'm like, "Uh-huh, okay, uh-huh, uh-huh." I mean, everyone thinks they're unique in that regard, and it's like,
You're not,
you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how often
you're
you
not
hear
that
that.
special. Oh man. So speaking of unique, how can somebody separate themselves? Like what personal statements do you read that make you go, "Oh, this is impressive."
So if some of my colleagues were with me right now and we were sharing the Zoom screen or the thing, they would cringe because I always cringe when I hear this question from applicants.
Yeah.
They say like, "Well, how can I stand out, Dean Simmons? How can I make myself?" And it's like, ugh, that's not really your job. Like your
Mm.
job is really to show that you can follow directions and that you are being authentic and genuine and that you really understand what you're trying to pursue. I think that the one way that you could separate yourself is that you could actually demonstrate that you follow directions because
Mhm.
so many people don't follow directions in this process that it's wild. Like I find myself shocked 27 years later the number of applicants who literally will submit a document that's a page over than what we requested, and it's like, why would you do that? And we try to explain, like, so you do understand that when you're a lawyer, if you go to court and the judge said, I want 3 pages for you to, so you can explain why this person shouldn't go to jail, and your best argument is on page 4 could be in the trash, depending on how
Yeah.
harsh she is or how tired she is that day, or what have you. And so following directions, I think, is such an overlooked tool in this process
Yeah.
that it would get so many candidates much further. I also think that one way you could possibly make yourself look like a formidable candidate is to actually tell your story. I mean, I feel like people spend so much time trying to think through what they think the admissions committee wants to hear
Mhm.
versus actually telling their own story. And you're unique in telling your own story by its own right, because the two of us could have the same LSAT score, same GPA, same major, have gone to the same school, raised in the same town, gone to the same high school,
Mhm.
and our stories will still be unique and different because our
Yeah.
motivation, our family background, what we've been exposed to, what we want to be exposed to will all be different. And so I do think that
Yeah.
there's something to be said for keeping it simple and just
Mhm.
not overthinking it. And really just, being thorough and thoughtful. I mean, I think, as a practicing attorney that, paying attention to detail is everything. And,
Yes.
and so when you are submitting an application and you try to use the same personal statement for 10 schools, inevitably, when you're not slowing down, you're going to submit, that application for the University of Arizona for the University of Colorado, because
Mhm.
because if you're rushing and you're not paying it, it's going to happen because you're not being authentic and
Right.
genuine. You're just changing that one little through line,
Yeah, copy and
and it's
paste.
inevitable that you saved it in the wrong folder and you just forgot because you're trying to get them all in because you want to go on vacation this weekend. Like, it just happens all the time. There's not a year that's gone by where I've not seen a good candidate, statistically, make that kind of faux pas. And I have worked at
Yeah.
institutions where faculty members are like, well, we have too many applicants and so few seats. And if they can't bother to double check what they're submitting, I don't need to read the rest of this. And so, again, that's the way that you often stand out in a negative way. And so it's just not worth it. Just slow down, follow directions, and just be thoughtful about what you're trying to communicate to each school.
Yeah.
And you will separate yourself that way because so many people aren't doing that.
That is such a great skill to learn early because I practiced in federal court and I had a trial and we had to submit a pretrial memo. And I put together the whole memo. I had all my exhibits in there, witnesses, and I went back to the scheduling order from the judge. And he had a very specific way that he wanted his pretrial memo. He wanted the exhibits listed under an alphabetical order. He wanted this and that. And I had to go back and redo everything. Even though it was all my information was in there, it was
Mhm,
orderly, it was clean, it was grammatically
mhm.
correct, but I had to change it all because the judge asked for this in a very specific way, and I can't just submit it to the court and be like, "Take it how you want it." No, you have to
Like,
follow
just have
direction.
it.
Yeah, yeah. No, you
Nope.
absolutely have to. That's a great, great skill. Wow. And also, like when you spoke about telling a story, I think people underestimate how interesting people actually are. I feel like everybody has. If you actually sit down with most people, they have something interesting to say. I think a lot of people get caught up in, like, I guess, celebrities or influencers and think that they're the only ones with interesting stories. Like, no, you have a very specific story that somebody will find interesting. Yeah.
Social media, and I will often say this, I will say, like, social media has led y'all to believe that you are not special enough or unique enough, or
Mhm.
you have to do something, crazy to stand out, and it's just not
Yeah.
true. And so that's unfortunate, right? Because,
Yeah.
again, there's a wasted opportunity. We're trying to build a class. I'm building a community, and
Hmm.
I'm building on a legacy. And so I want to be thoughtful about who I'm bringing into the profession, but I'm also
Yeah.
being thoughtful about who I'm bringing into the community and who I'm sitting in the classroom with other folks, and ultimately who is going to go out there and change the world for, hopefully for the positive. And
Yeah.
so being able to just tell me who you are is more than enough. So
Yeah. In the podcast I was listening to that you did today, you didn't do it today, but I was listening to it today. You said something interesting. You said when you're choosing people you can successfully educate. and I haven't heard it put that way before, and I love that. How can you know that you can successfully educate somebody at the outset?
I mm, I think it comes from definitely from years of doing this. I
Mhm,
will say that being a social worker, I think has helped
mhm,
me in a lot of different spaces in my life. And I think that, being able to kind of sit and actually like read and or listen to people will give you a lot of insight in terms of who they are, what drives them, what motivates them. You'll learn a little bit more about their heart, right? And so I think that, the
mhm,
LSAT score and the GPA will tell me something. The letters recommendation will tell me something else. But what you choose to focus on in your statements, who you chose to write your letters recommendation, those also tell me things about you. And so I think that when we're evaluating applications, we are trying to think about who is going to come in the space and blossom and flourish. Like if you're so regimented that you don't come across as someone that is open-minded enough to be taught, that's a challenge because then I'm thinking about my faculty members and, I don't want them coming back like, "Why did you admit her? Like,
just
she
give me
doesn't
a
listen
hard
to me.
time, yeah.
Like, she's giving me a hard time. I just, I've done this for 30 years and I'm telling her this is the principle and she's
Mhm,
arguing with me in class about why it's not." And so, and I will say to
mhm,
applicants, like, this is one of those opportunities where I'm looking to see whether you have that mixture of humility along with confidence. Because I think in law
mhm,
school, as you probably remember, there were probably times when you went into class, you read something 3 or 4 times, you were preparing because you knew you were getting called on, and you had a whole thought process about why the case was cited the way it was, and what facts would have made a difference, and what principles or policies would have made a difference. And your professor comes out of the blue with something, you're like, "Yeah,
Amen.
that's not at all on my radar, and I didn't see it, wasn't thinking it, and I don't even know if I'm really feeling it." But in that moment, you
Mhm,
understand that he or she is telling you, "This is how I see it, and for my midterm or my exam, this is how I expect you to argue this particular fact," kind of
exactly,
thing. And so I think
yeah,
the other part of it is just really looking to see, like what they've exposed themselves to. Have they challenged themselves in other ways? Have they always just played it safe? Because I think it's important that in these spaces that you can't completely play it safe. You have to be able to come in class and be vulnerable and you have to be able to raise your hand and sometimes get it wrong. And I think that for the
mhm,
people who are super black and white, those are the folks that struggle in law school, right? Because
yeah,
the the professors, they're going to give you something and the case is going to say something else and five other classmates are going to see it completely differently and you have to be able to listen enough to not get caught up in your own thoughts so that your notes are thorough enough that when you go create your outlines and your note cards, you're ready for that final, irrespective of what your personal thoughts were. And so I think it's a combination of those things.
100%.
I know it's a long-winded answer to that, but
No,
I
that's
feel like
real.
it's a lot of things that kind of, for many of us that have done this for a while, we say it's kind of like art and science,
Mhm,
and that's kinda
mhm,
what we mean, like, it's some of it's that gut instinct that you have about someone, and
yeah,
then some of it's looking it's like, what are they saying about themselves? What are they not saying about themselves? How do they explain things? And so the last example I'll give you is
mhm,
a good indicator about someone's openness and willingness to learn is how they explain a mistake they made.
mhm,
And whether they take responsibility, whether they have any ownership, or whether they completely blame the system, the teacher, the professor, the parent, the what, because we all make mistakes. But I was raised,
yeah,
my parents were very much like if I came home and said, such and such said something to me, and they'd say, well, so what did you say? And I'd be like, oh,
mhm,
like,
right.
like,
I left that part out.
and so I kind of have I try to
Yeah,
bring that into my kind of world in terms of like always trying to be thoughtful about like there are often two sides of things, but having that ownership and level of responsibility, I think is super important, particularly for this profession, right? Because you're
yeah,
responsible. I mean, I tell like you're responsible for someone's life, liberty, and property at some point. For some
yeah,
of these folks, they're going to be 23 years old when they graduate from law school. They're going to be 27 years old and will have, only held two or three jobs and will literally be responsible for someone's company that, is about to go
sheesh.
bankrupt. Or
Yeah,
literally helping someone, fix an adoption, situation that went wrong or what have you. And so just trying to think through like, where can I see them in 3 or 4 years? And
yeah.
and how will they kinda show up in the classroom?
That's so real. That's not something I even thought about being in law school, like, the open-mindedness. I feel like I was just, like, thrown into it, and I had to be open-minded because, like you said, especially in, like, crim pro, crim law,
Whoa.
and you're like, no, this is wrong. This
Yes.
no way. This is the law. Wait, this is still a law. This wasn't overturned. Like all that stuff. I'm like, no way. And he's like, listen, you better write that as the law, as the rule on the test,
Mhm.
because I don't care how, it's not about how you feel, it's what you can prove. And I feel like, yeah, I didn't know I had to get that skill, or I even had that skill to be open minded to be in that space. But that's 100%. You have
Yeah.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
man. Um, so what made you even want to be in this profession in the first place? What made you want to form the future generation of the legal field, and not practice yourself, not practice law yourself?
Yeah. So I was not someone who always thought about law school. Like
Mhm,
if you asked me when I was pledging or just in
mhm,
college, I always said I wanted to be a child psychologist.
mhm,
And, and I don't know. I thought that was my thing. And then I did a master's program in education, and the emphasis was on multicultural counseling. It was like a year-long community-based program, so kind of intense. And I was like,
mhm,
"This is so deep," and I learned a lot about myself, and then I did a
mhm,
year-long research project, and then I was like, "I don't really know what I'm doing." And I had an aunt who kept saying, "You should go be a social worker," and I'm like, "Why?" Like, I don't even know what social workers do. Like, I don't understand why you keep saying this. Now, turns out that
yeah,
probably changed my life in so many good ways that I just didn't even anticipate. But what it did was that it exposed me to the foster care system and a whole way of, oh gosh, how systems work and don't work, and how lots of people don't communicate. And so I was shocked. I was 23 years old when I started that job, and I had my own thoughts about how family came together.
mhm,
I grew up in a family where I never really heard people refer to someone as like a step cousin or step
mhm,
like we just didn't. That's just not
right,
in my family. That's not what we did. I was in my dad
same,
was in the military, so we moved around a lot. So knew lots of
mhm,
different configurations of family. But so long story short, I kept working with all these kids, and I just didn't understand why all the attorneys weren't talking. Like the foster care agency I worked for, so I worked for a private foster care agency, had an attorney. The county had an
mhm,
attorney. The biological parents, if they were together, had an attorney, or if they were separated, had their own attorneys. The kid or kids would have
mhm,
their attorney. The school would have one, on and on and on. And I was like,
mhm.
so is no one talk? Like, I don't understand why no one's talking to each other.
Talking shit.
Um, it's like this doesn't make sense to me. And I'm like, and why
Yeah,
is no one asking this child what they want? And so that's
man,
what led me to even just be interested in law school. And then I
man,
was like, well, let me just apply to law school, I think. And my parents were like, what? And I was like, yeah, I don't know.
mhm,
I'm just going to do it. And
yeah,
then when I was in law school, I kept going to the admissions and financial aid office. And I was like, so what is this job? I was like, no, what do y'all
wow,
do? And
mhm,
at the same time, I was like, I think I probably would maybe be a public defender. And I had two or
hmm,
three mentors. And I was involved in all the groups, of course, because social and whatever. So, like, one of
mhm,
my mentors from Apalsa, the Asian Pacific Islander group, and another one from
mhm,
LALSA, the Latino group, and Balsa, um, were like, you probably should get experience in the DA's office first, just to see. I was like,
mhm.
okay, like, and in my mind, I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense because it probably makes really good attorneys, like if you have experience on both sides. And there were a
Mhm,
lot of people that I met. There were, mentors and judges and attorneys who had done a little bit of both. It was
mhm,
San Francisco. And so if you think about that, it makes
mm,
sense because the approach is, for example, at the San Francisco DA's office,
yeah,
if you were going to arrest like streetwalkers, women of the
mhm,
night, they were very focused on the fact that they shouldn't just be arresting the women. They were focused on the fact that let's talk to the Johns too. Like, why are you
mhm,
out here pursuing this?
right,
Because literally this wouldn't be an issue if you weren't out here. And
painful,
so I
yeah,
was like, that's a good approach, right? And
yeah,
so I love this. And then I ended up doing a trip. So my admissions office was like, hey, can you go to New York for us for a recruitment trip? And I was like, "Wait a minute." I was like, "So you're gonna send me to New York to stand at a table to talk about the school, and then you're paying for my hotel, flight, food, whatever." I was like,
mhm,
"That seems like the best job ever." Not no no n n had I known, I don't maybe I would be here, but.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so I was like, "This is awesome." And then I did another, I did 2 more stints maybe at the DA's office, and I did a federal externship with a magistrate judge,
nice,
and it kinda had civil court and some other stuff, and I was like, "This is kinda cool." And
mhm,
then but I did the the year the semester after law school, a lot of schools will hire their grads to be
Mhm.
seasonal recruiters, and so I met all these people, and about half of them had law degrees, half did not. Out of the half that had law degrees, some had practiced, many had not. And I was like, I think this is my job. Like, I feel like this is what I'm supposed to do.
Mm.
And so I
Yeah.
went back and I said, hey, if a job becomes open in the next couple months, please hire me because I think this is what I'm supposed to do. And so one of my
Wow.
good friends, the one the Law 401 podcast, Michael Donnelly
Mm.
Boylan, we met
Yeah.
that fall.
Wow.
And we didn't know we'd see each other again because he didn't know I would be back in the business, and we've been best friends ever since. But
Awesome.
I think it just came to me that, like, this is where I could maybe have an impact, and
Mm.
I just really loved actually being out there and talking about the process and giving advice to
Hmm.
people who, like, I didn't have any of this when I was applying. I didn't know what I was doing, you know? And so
Mm.
I just
Yeah.
somehow ended up here and, you know, I feel like, I don't know, God definitely directs my I mean, I feel like there've been so many things in my life that I just did not plan on that have led
100%.
me to the right place, and so I've just trusted that part of the process and felt like this is where I was supposed to be,
Yeah.
and I've
No,
literally never looked back.
yeah. No, that's amazing. I love that. I always say it's a rhythm. I feel like life is in the rhythm.
I
It's like
love
you
that.
can't yeah, it's you just know when it feels right. You just know when the next hit is, you just know when the next move is. Because even when you're talking about it, it seemed like it was a seamless transition, and it didn't feel like it was like, "Oh, should I?" You just, "Oh, no, this makes sense." Like, this doesn't feel like I have to force myself to do it. And I feel like even in this process for law school, a lot of people feel like I need to be a lawyer. I need
Right.
to practice in this specific area. And then you're in year 3 of law school and like you meet this one person or you go to this event and you're like, wait a minute, this feels really good. Like
Mhm,
talking to this
mhm.
person feels really good. Or I do this internship and wow, this
Yeah.
work feels really good. And being able to recognize that and be like, okay, now this is how I want to pursue it. So that's amazing that you were able to recognize that.
Also
Yeah.
think in this political climate, in this in our world right now, the ability to pivot is so important. My
Yes.
dean of career services and professional development, she came onto a webinar we were doing probably last year, maybe,
Hmm.
and we asked our career services folks to speak to these prospective students about like where things are, and one of the things she said was like, you all have to have the ability to pivot. She was like, some of you may have dreamed about coming to law school and doing this one thing, and right now that one thing may not exist. So, like, Department of Justice Honors Program, or, all these things that basically went away, if that's all you wanted to do, you have to decide, do you really want to be a lawyer? Because it doesn't mean you will never get to do that work. But right now, or in the next year or 3 years, it might not be available. You can still
Yeah.
build the skill set, you can still do the networking and do all the other things to get you ready for whatever that might look like in the future. But if you really want to be a lawyer, attorney, you're
Hmm.
going to go to law school, get your skills up, and get all the things
Yeah.
done and pivot. And so again, I've been talking about that a little bit more because I do think that even in this climate right now, with the law school process being so competitive, I feel
Yeah.
like for many candidates, that's been probably their most important thing. So I love the rhythm,
Mhm.
part of that, because I feel like maybe some people that might resonate with them a little bit more because
Yeah.
you just have to kind of go with it sometimes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah.
I'll lastly say, like, one of the struggles I think is that you have a lot of law school applicants who are like, I want to go to this school, and if I don't go to this
Mhm.
school, I'm not going to be successful. And it's like, well, there are 198 ABA law schools out there who have successful alumni around the world who are judges, attorneys,
Mm.
policymakers, health compliance officers, running corporations, etc. And I promise you that you can still be successful if you don't go to the school that's allegedly ranked blah 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 this year, because it could be
Yeah.
ranked something else next year, and that's not going to change anything. And so I do
Yeah.
think that that's part of our job, is to help our candidates see that they really do have
Yeah.
options, and
Mhm.
that they also just sometimes have to make a choice about, your dream just may pan out a little differently. Your dream doesn't have to go away because you didn't get into that one school, but if these other two schools gave you an opportunity, that's where your blessing is. And so maybe that's where you're supposed
100%.
to be. And so
100%.
I'm hoping for many candidates that they can figure that out, because I know, like, this cycle has been really tough on a lot of folks. But
Yeah,
then, and because again, the numbers don't always tell the whole story, but also when the numbers are so competitive and we have so many people wanting to go to law school, there's just not room for all of them. So,
that's real. And I wonder if that's something that you don't learn until you get to the other side. Like one of those things, like I could tell you, I could beat you over the head with it all I want, but you don't learn. Because even practicing now, I didn't know how much or how easy, I don't say easy, but the space I have to pivot now that I'm barred and I'm a barred
mhm,
attorney. Because at the first end of that is that you got to learn all this anyway. Like me working
absolutely.
I had to learn my job from scratch. Law school taught me like the core traits, but like learning the actual job, who to talk to, where to file, when to show up to court, how to check your calendar, you got to learn that anyway. You have to learn the statutes that you use. So whatever arena that you pivoted, you're gonna have to learn from scratch anyway. So it takes the pressure off of like, if I didn't practice contract law in law school, there's no way I could be a contract attorney, and that's just not true.
That's so
So
true.
yeah. It's interesting you mentioned about the rankings of the law school. Even that, I feel like you may not recognize until you're on the other side of how much it matters, but not really. Like how, and also with this new generation, it feels like Gen Z and Gen A have come into like an awakening about like the job market, about like what am I getting out of this, and the
Mhm,
pay, and not being able to afford homes and not being
mhm.
able to afford things, and they're able to recognize like I may this may not be the best system, but somehow, like you talked about, they're still obsessed with the rankings. It may not be a one to one. Why do you think people still care about the rankings? You would think in 2026 people have like come to an awakening of like rankings don't matter. I'm not gonna oblige by these big institutions, but it still matters. Why does it still
Yeah.
matter in
I
2026?
I I think I think we're all at fault to some degree, right? Because I think
Mhm,
that we even treat people differently based on the rank of where they work. I mean, I've watched people who have gone to law schools that are not ranked work at a
mhm.
law school that's highly ranked and be treated completely differently in terms of
Yeah.
opportunities and things like that. And so I think that that lends itself to
Mhm,
right. I've watched I've watched in the consulting space, I've watched people make choices about who they want to work with based on rank, irrespective of the fact that maybe they have 20 less years experience than someone else. I've watched people turn down opportunities. I had someone tell me once that he was only applying to 3 schools, and if he didn't get into one of those 3 schools, he was not going to law school. And I was like, "So you don't want to
mhm.
actually be an attorney?" Which, as
Exactly.
someone who is a gatekeeper for the profession, I'm fine with because that your motives are not on par with what the profession is really about.
Mhm,
I think we rank everything. I mean, part of the challenge is like we rank cars, we rank cameras, and so
mhm,
I think it's
mhm,
easy to fall into that trap. I agree with you that I have found that there are definitely more candidates that are way more sophisticated these days than in the past in terms of looking beyond it.
mhm,
I'm in a space where I'm at a HBCU and there are only 6 of us, and if you look
mhm,
at the stats, I mean, my employment stats are so competitive compared to many other schools, irrespective of where they're ranked. And so I get a lot of really strong candidates who realize, like, oh, so to be successful, I just need the right mentors and I need to do the right networking and I'll be okay. Yeah, actually, that's it because you can go to, I
legit.
know some folks who have gone to some of the other schools and they didn't have the best jobs right out because they weren't ranked high enough in their class. Like
Mhm,
there's some employers
mhm,
who, if you're not in the top 5%, top 2%, you're not getting an interview
mhm.
irrespective of the rank of the school. And those
Right.
same employers will take the top 1% at every school that they, in their so it's one of those things where I feel like, we are in a weird quandary because I think there are also some universities who are really, really focused on it, while there are others. And I feel very blessed to be in the space I'm in right now where
Mhm,
my faculty, what they really care about are opportunities and placement. Like they're really focused
mhm,
on making sure that these students have exposure to as many types of law as possible and have as many opportunities as possible for internships and externships because they know
mhm,
that will make a difference at the end. But I just think that it's a weird. I remember when because I didn't know anything really about it. I'm first gen, and so I was just like looking
mhm.
at schools everywhere in the Bay Area. At that point, I was like, well, they all seem like good schools. I don't know. And having been on the other side, on the side of it now, the amount of money that we spend because of the rankings. So I
Mm,
often tell the students, like, part of the problem is that because they're so focused on the rankings for a variety of reasons, that's made the law schools focus on the rankings, and so that means that, we don't have, like, as many, like, need-based scholarships. They're mostly merit type scholarships
mm,
because everyone wants to
mm,
move their LSAT or GPA. Well,
mm.
the reality is that we probably have way more people that have need, from a financial perspective than anything else, and so it's an unfortunate quandary, I think.
Yeah,
Um, and it's a magazine. As one of my colleagues who does work at a very highly ranked schools has pointed out, like, it's still just a magazine on some level. And we've watched them change, the calculations and things like that for years, and you see schools move, and it's like, do you really think that school that went from 1 to 3 is really
right.
that from 1 year to the next?
Yeah,
Like, look, their
yeah.
stat, like, look, their grads are happy and they're doing just fine. And so
Mhm.
it's a weird thing. I wish it didn't have so much of a hold
Yeah,
on applicants, because I do feel like I've seen many a student pick the wrong school for the wrong reason and end up unhappy. There was a
yeah.
study that was done. Um, a professor that I have a lot of respect for, who's now retired, but he was involved in a study from with the AALS, and I can't remember if the ABA was involved or not, but basically it focused on, it might have been first gen students of color and law school satisfaction. And basically the outcome was that many of them weren't unhappy with their law school choice because they chose for the wrong reasons,
Man,
as opposed to coming up with their own ranking of what matters to them. And so I tell candidates all
right.
the time, what are the top 5 things that you really think you need to be successful in law school? What were the top 3 things that you liked about your undergraduate program? What didn't you like? And then create your
Mhm,
own list of what your non-negotiables are and what you're kind of like, it would be great, but I could live without it, kind of thing. And then see how that matches up, because they don't necessarily rank all the things that are important to a lot of candidates. And unfortunately, though, we often put that aside because I've heard mentors, like, of my students who are practicing attorneys and judges say, "Well, just go to the highest ranked school possible." Well, what does that school
mm,
look like for you? Like,
right.
your age range, your
Yeah,
family background, your financial situation, is this a good fit for you as opposed to just being the highest ranked school? And for some people that might work out, but it doesn't work out for everyone. And so
100%. Yeah. Weren't certain schools, like, stopped ranking? Was it I think it's either Chicago or Yale said they're no longer gonna rank. Is that still happening? Are people, like,
I
dropping
don't
out of
really know,
the
because my school so doesn't pay attention to it. I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
There was a full year or so where people were just did not, didn't wanna participate because they felt like, some of it was just off, like, and I remember being in some
yeah,
meetings at some of our, major conferences where there were lots of questions being posed about, like, "What's the calculation? What's the formula? Why are you changing this?" And there weren't
right.
really great answers,
Hmm,
and I think it just left some folks feeling like, "Ugh, this is a mess." And then I think for some of the law schools and some of the deans and folks, I think they were put in a weird situation, because if your university is saying, "We really care about this and you're going to submit it
yeah,
no matter what," then what do, right? You risk getting,
right.
and so I think that put people in a tough spot too. But there were some people
Hmm,
who, that just said, like, "We're not gonna participate this year," and then we're back to normal.
that's
And,
real.
you know
Yeah. No, I agree, and yeah, I went to UDC. It's not ranked, and it's funny you mentioned the DOJ Honors program. I got into the DOJ Honors program, and honestly, that was one of my biggest fears. Even when I would go to, like, the interest meetings where DOJ attorneys were
Mhm.
talking to us, in my head, I was literally saying, "There's no way I'm gonna get
They're gonna
this.
pick me.
There's no way I'm gonna get this. They're not gonna pick me. Like, I don't go to Yale. I don't go to Harvard. That's all they choose." And I applied twice, actually. The first time I don't think I submitted my application because I talked myself out of it, and I told myself I would never do that again, and then the next
Mhm.
year, I applied and got in, and it was just that fear of, like, I know how the system works. I know how this
Right.
goes, so there's no way I'm gonna be marketable in this space, but like you said, if you just the right internships, the right mentors. I interned at DOJ, and I was still telling myself I was working full time in DC. I had all these
Mm.
great attorneys that I was connected with, and in my head, I was still like, not enough, but it was more than enough. And I
More
wish
than
I
enough.
could, yeah, instill that into students of, like, what you have, the steps that you're taking, the opportunities that you're taking, it's more than enough, 100%.
I
Yeah.
keep telling the applicants, like, and we've doing some sessions, and I keep saying, like, just don't play yourself small. You know what I mean? Like, don't
Yeah.
put yourself in a box. And being humble is one thing, but but like you said, talking yourself out of potential opportunities or telling yourself no before you even get, you just can't do that because
Yeah.
again, closed mouths don't get fed, and so
Real.
if you don't ask, you'll never know, and then you have to live
Yeah.
with, like, "But what if?" You don't ever wanna put yourself in that situation, like, I
Mm.
think you just don't wanna have regrets where you just didn't even try.
Yeah.
Like, let them
Yeah.
tell you no, don't tell yourself
Mm.
no before you even put yourself in the game.
Yeah. Have you experienced that in your profession? Like, has there been moments in your profession where you felt like you weren't good enough to be a
My
dean or to be an
gosh,
admissions?
let me tell you something, like, I that's funny you asked that because in the podcast I did with Dean Roberts, that
Mhm.
she said something, and I was like, "Oh, yeah," like, when my colleague friend asked me to write the book, I was like
Mhm.
I was like, "Who? Me? Like, why me?" Like, and she was like, "Why not you?" And I'm like,
Mhm.
"But," and then I just had to have a whole moment of like,
Mhm.
okay, okay. Applying for this fellowship. I've never done anything like it. And when we got into that first meeting, I was like, I don't even know. Like, I have never opened Google Scholar in my life. Like, what are we supposed to use? Like, I mean, they're like IRB, like, we have to submit a committee, like, what? And so
Mhm.
but I feel like I can't tell my students and I can't tell my applicants not to keep pushing if I'm not going to do it myself. Right.
Mm.
And I'm very mindful of the fact that I am a Black woman who, I have grandparents who, weren't able to do so many things that I've been blessed to be able to do.
Yeah.
And, I remember my dad talking about, his dad being a sharecropper and,
Mm.
how so many of them ended up going to the military because that was their only option. And so I try to be
Man.
mindful that when I'm given these opportunities, I have to take advantage of them because if not me, then who?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in to whom much is given, much is required. And so I feel like I've been blessed along the way
Man.
with great mentors and just things of that nature. And so if you can give back, give back. But I
Yeah.
definitely, I mean, that self doubt, that self talk thing, like, woo,
Man.
sometimes I have to just talk myself off the ledge. Like, okay, you need to just sit down and just do it. Like, get it done.
Yeah.
You're fine. You're gonna be okay. Um, and it's gonna be
And
fine.
then
Like, it'll be
and
okay.
then you look back and it's just part of your resume, and it seems like such a small part of your story. It's like, no, that was a big mountain in my life. And that was a lot of my resume. That it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the book. You wrote Law School for Dummies. Have you ever written a book before? Was this your first book you've written?
Never in my life. And I feel like I am the only person on the planet who had not ever planned to write a book. Because now every time I meet people are like, "Well, I've been thinking about writing." I'm like, "I have never, ever thought about writing a book, and now I'm gonna have
Man,
2 books out in 1 year."
that's
And
crazy.
I just, yeah, it's one of those things that,
Hmm.
I'm super grateful for the opportunity. I think that, I tell people all the time, I think that I'm good at my job because I have so many great people from other law schools around me. We
Yeah.
do a lot of events together, and so I get to listen in
Mhm.
on what they're sharing and things of that nature, but I also get to learn from the applicants and students all the time.
Yeah.
But I had like, when I tell you this was not on, like, when she approached me, I was
Who, me?
like, who you talking to?
Did you get the
You
right
know?
Tracy Simmons?
So,
Which one I know the Tracy Simmons out the block. It might
like,
be.
who like, me? So, yeah, I just
Yeah.
I feel very lucky, though, to have been in that
Yeah.
space because it did let me reflect on the fact that I have learned a lot. And there are a lot of things that I would have done differently had someone been in my corner, had
Yeah.
someone just, but, for this is for all the people who don't have a pre-law advisor. This is for all the people who've been out for a few years who don't feel like they know anyone that they could turn to and ask them basic questions about how this whole thing works. Because it can be overwhelming, but the goal is to make it less so. And so
Yeah.
if there's anything that I say in there that gives someone a little bit of hope or a little bit of optimism or a little structure or
Yeah.
something, I will be forever grateful that I was able to help someone.
Yeah.
Because I know so many people who didn't have, they just had to kind of wing it and figure it out on their own.
Yeah. And so isn't so for dummies, isn't it like a conglomerate? It's like there's like a uh reading for dummies, riding a bike for dummies.
Yeah,
So isn't like
yeah.
a whole entity, right?
So
So they
I
reach out to
actually
different people.
have yeah, 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 like, Wiley
Uh,
is it's so it's funny because I was having this conversation with my mom, a couple
yeah.
months ago before the book came out, and she was saying that she was talking to someone, they're like, "Oh, yeah, I've been working on the book and blah, blah, blah," and then she's like, "Oh, my daughter, blah, blah, blah," and so they're like, "Oh, like, that's a real publishing company," and she's like, "Yeah,"
Mhm.
and so because I've met a lot of people who have self-published and stuff, I don't know anything about that world because, again, not
Mhm.
on my radar.
I'm not ready, but I
And
got
the
you.
level of energy that would take, like, I applaud anyone who's done that because that level of
Yeah.
work is insane. And so it's a major publishing company. They have a lot of parameters about how you have to structure things. And because it's supposed to be for a layperson, it's supposed to be for someone who does
Right.
not have expertise in that area, it has to be really simplistic. And so one of my biggest concerns initially was, oh my gosh, like some of my writing professors or someone's gonna think like, "What the hell happened?" Because you have to use contractions, like things that you don't do in legal writing. Like all the things that you learn in law school about writing, you don't,
Yeah.
you can't do that for the dummies because it can't be that
Right.
formal. It needs to be, and so that was
Regulated.
a initially a struggle. But then once you get into it, you kind of get a cadence and you're fine. But
Yeah.
just trying to like one of my friends who is a dean of admissions at another school here in DC, she said, "Why don't you just start off by talking to your phone? Like, think about the
Mm,
subject and start talking to yourself, like you were talking to an applicant. And what would you say?" And that helped me a lot because I was like, "Yeah, like this is, I don't, I do this all
mhm,
day, every day, but I don't think
mhm.
about it like that. Like if you say
Right.
like, what's the best thing to focus on in a personal statement, I could just rattle it off, whatever. But to sit and
Mm.
think through how do I,
Type it,
that was
yeah.
not my framework. And
Yeah.
so that helped me a lot too. But they're
Mm,
very, very structured. You have a schedule, you have an editor. By the time we got to the end, I had an editor who had an editor. And so when I would get the stuff back, but they were both really good. And so that made it really easy for me because
mm,
they both were very clear about like, if they weren't, they're like, "You're the expert, we're not the expert." And so if we're asking a question and you think
mm,
that our question is silly because of X, or if we say, "Can you make this less complicated?" So they were really, really clear, and so that helped me a
yeah.
lot. Um, but yeah, it was a lot of work.
I
Like
love
I
that,
will not
yeah.
like it was a lot of work. Like I didn't I didn't realize, even though I've done this for 27 years, the first book was written about 30 years ago. And what you don't realize
Mm,
is that how much stuff changes in 30 years. And so even just like language and
mm,
the number of times the LSAT is offered, or we
mhm,
weren't talking about neurodivergency back then, or we weren't talking about accommodations, we weren't talking about next
mm,
gen bar and
mhm,
NPRE and all these other things in the way that we do now. And so I didn't realize that I wasn't just kind of rewriting, that there were a lot of things
yeah,
that I had to develop on my own because it was just brand
yeah,
new.
yeah,
Which was fine, but
yeah.
going in and saying yes is
Yeah.
different than the execution. So
Yeah. Man, that's amazing. So, what's the biggest takeaway somebody could take from this book? Give them like a commercial for the book, if you will.
I would say, that it's a book for anyone who's thinking about applying to law school, in law school, and is looking for just some general tips and general advice. I think that, there are quotes in there from, other law school professionals and practicing attorneys and professors. I think there are a lot of tips in there about how to kind of get out of your own head and get out of your own way. And I think that one person told me they were reading it and they weren't totally convinced they were going to go to law school, but they obtained a lot of good life advice out of it that probably will help them if they're applying to another type of program. And I thought that was great.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I just think it's for anyone that's going to law school, in law school. I think you'll find it's way more comprehensive than I think people expected. Because it really
Mhm.
is from like how do you pick a law school to applying to what happens through the bar
Yeah.
and graduation. So it takes you all the way
Nice.
through.
Awesome. It's funny because usually when I started law school or when I would go to these different, like, events, the without fail, a question is what should I read before going to law school? Or is there a book
Mhm,
I should read before going to law school? And
mhm.
most of the answers were, don't read. You're going to do enough reading in law school. Like, you don't have to read no books.
We still
They
say
will
that though.
suggest, yeah, they will suggest something here and there. But when I was looking through the law school for dummies, I was like, I would 100% recommend this. Like, this is the book you should read before law school. This will actually be helpful, and not some other book that you may think is going to help you. But this is good. Yeah.
There's another one that's out there. So there's a colleague of yours from UDC who I've done a couple
Mm-hmm.
book things with, Naja Bostic, who the title is slipping my mind, but I will share it with you via email.
Yeah.
But it basically talks about kind of from being dismissed to being barred. Um, and she's a super successful attorney in Maryland now and doing great work. And so we've done some book stuff together because she has some really good perspectives about, like it's not always linear. Like everyone doesn't get in and they're all not successful the whole way through and you just graduate. Like for some people it's bumps
Mm-hmm.
and stops and you have to kind of get back up
Yeah.
on that horse and try again. And then there's another one, mindset, and at one of the schools I worked for, um, so much of what happens in this space is really about how you approach it and how
Mm-hmm.
you talk to yourself and how you think about yourself, but also managing your friends and family, especially for first gen students. Like I have found that for so many of my first gen students and students from immigrant families and stuff, getting them to understand, why you can't come for Sunday dinner every week or why you can't be the one to organize a family barbecue or the bar
Yeah.
mitzvah or the quinceañera or why,
Mhm.
you cannot come home for Thanksgiving because final exams start 3 days later and you need to get all
Mhm.
like really helping them understand how much of a management process this will be is super important. And I think that I've even had first gen students come back to me in their second or third year, like, can you do another session for families? Because my people just don't understand why, I'm still, having to put this much work in. And it's like, if you've never gone to law school, you don't know why it could take someone 2 hours to
Mhm.
read 10 pages or why preparing for being called on, is a half
Mhm.
day process depending on the professor. Because I mean, I had a professor who he was so picky about the pronouns and the what, like if you got anything wrong, you were going to
Mhm.
be at his whatever for the rest of the
Yeah.
class. And so,
Yeah.
being on point is so important. And so,
Mhm.
not having that in your toolkit, I think, is something that's important. And so, working on your mindset and getting your family members ready.
100%. Yeah.
I often encourage folks when they're participating in virtual events, for example, have your family or friend or your best friend or your spouse or your partner or your kids that are old enough to understand or your grandparents who you're close to, have them listen in the background so that they're
Mm.
hearing what the current students and alumni are saying about why it's so hard, about
Mhm.
why it takes so much time, about why that investment, particularly in your first year, can make all the difference in the rest of your law school career. And also just reminding them that this is 3 or 4 years of sacrifice for the rest of your life and how it
Yeah.
literally can make a difference in terms of what you experience. And so that's another one that I recommend. It's called Mindset. And I think it's a really good, a good one
Yeah.
to start. If you're going to read anything in the summer, I wouldn't recommend reading all the things, but I definitely think that
Yeah.
between my book, between Naj's book, and between
Yeah.
mindset, those are some good opportunities for you to kind of think through what you need and getting yourself in that space of being spiritually, mentally, physically, financially in a better space so that you start off on the right foot. Because it's a chance for everyone to do it over. Whatever you did in
Yeah.
undergrad or grad school, it doesn't matter. You
Mhm.
you get the chance to start over. And so you want to start on the right note when you get to and again, lastly, for most of us, this is the last time we're going to school. Don't you wanna make the most of
True.
it?
It's definitely
Make the most
definitely
of
my
it.
last time. It was definitely my last time, for sure. Once I graduate, I'm never stepping foot in school again. This was enough. This was good. This was
A
it.
lot of people say that. A lot of people say that.
So how is writing the second book, Critical Race Theory for Dummies, especially in this climate, especially with books getting banned, critical race theory being attacked, and all this stuff? Like, how's that process?
It's interesting. So my co-author is a good friend. We used to work together. He's a great writer. And the way we had to divide up the chapters and stuff, it's definitely fits our personalities and stuff. I think for me, what I'm finding to be the most challenging is as I'm trying to do research, I am finding myself just in some cases overwhelmed,
Hmm.
in some cases upset. Like I was working on the healthcare chapter and I ended up focusing on some stuff related to Henrietta Lacks. And I read the book, I've seen a lot of things. I thought I knew a lot, but as I
Mm.
did more research, I was just like, you
This is
know,
worse than I thought.
what? And then, looking at
Man.
Native American sterilization and
Yeah.
the Tuskegee, that I just as much as I thought I knew, I'm finding myself like, oh, or like education section, like that chapter, I was like, "Ugh." And I work in
Yeah.
education, so
Right.
I thought I knew some things, and I'm like, oh gosh, we have work to do. And so
Mhm.
trying to find ways to make sure that I'm being educational while informative, but also being true to what
Mhm.
critical race theory is really about. I mean, one of the reasons that I agreed to work on this was because I felt like I was stunned at the way people were attacking it. And then when I
Mhm.
realized that most of them had never gone to like Kimberly Crenshaw's like summer school, like I had gone to the CRT summer school like twice. And what they were saying,
Nice.
I'm like, I didn't learn anything about hating white people. I was like, I don't understand
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
where did this come from? But I realized like with a lot of things, we just let people take over the narrative and don't take the
Yeah.
time to correct it. And that's just not right. Like it is a theory
Man.
and
Yeah.
there are lots of facts and evidence, and as I'm doing more and more research, I'm realizing, like, there are lots of ways in which this theory really does apply as it relates to, discrimination and inequity and, and not just about race or ethnicity, but, in terms of gender and age
Yeah.
and socioeconomic status and your zip code and,
Right.
access
And like
to,
Kimberly Crenshaw always says the intersectionality of all those things
oh
too.
my
Like,
gosh,
yeah.
like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
it's deep and it's real, and I
Mhm.
think that we would be much further along as a society if we all understood it. And so,
Mhm.
I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, we'll see how it's received, right? Like, it's definitely a controversial, topic, but, if
Yeah.
people can take it for what it is and read it as you would read any other theory, I
Yeah.
think you could find yourself in a situation where you might learn some things and understand some situations better, understand some policy
Yeah.
decisions better, and understand why historically why some things have played out the way they played out and how they've manifested themselves into who we are today as a society. Because
Hmm.
there's some historical
Yeah.
stuff that I think people won't realize in terms of timelines and or how long some things went on, or even
Mhm.
how recent some things are. Like, I think that's the thing that will be probably alarming for some people is how
Yes.
recent some of these acts and policies are. So,
Yeah. Amazing. Um, let's say there's a 15-year-old girl named Stacy, and she and she wants to be a dean of admissions at a law school. What will you tell Stacy? What should Stacy do right now? What is a skill or a trait or think something she could do right now to be the next Tracy Simmons?
I would tell her that that's not her goal. Her goal is not to be me. Her goal is to go out there and really find the thing that makes her feel like she's making a difference. That, whether that be in education and becoming a teacher, or whether that be, in the social work space and becoming a social worker, or whether it be someone who's going to go run, some major conglomerate and all the construction sites for some big realtor. Like, whatever that thing is, I would tell her, go do that and be great at it.
Mm,
And to not let society's limits, let her, her family limits, get in the way of blocking whatever she wants to become. I think that it's
yeah.
super important that you find people that you can be mentored by,
Mm,
with the idea that you don't have to do everything the way they did it though. And I would say
yeah.
be better than me. Like, trust
Mm,
yourself, trust your gut, trust your instinct, but also just explore. Like, I think
mm,
being more open-minded and taking more risk, like if I were to do my life over, I would probably take
mm,
more risk. I would have done the
mm,
study about trip. I would have figured
mm,
out a way to just, take that second. I don't know. I just feel like I would tell her to be herself, but also to be true and genuine to whatever her dreams are, and to
yeah.
not forget what they ultimately are, irrespective of kind of what things block her path. to kind of just
Mm,
always keep her eyes on the prize. As
yeah.
one of my professors said in the summer before we started law school, I would, remind her to kind of keep that mantra of like, how bad do you want it? I am
Hmm.
a Tupac fan, so and to keep that at the forefront of her mind. How bad do
Yeah.
you want to be on the other side of this? How bad do you want to be that thing? Because
Mm,
ultimately you won't let money, you won't let an ability or a disability or a circumstance get in the way. You'll find a way around it. And it may not be this year,
yeah.
maybe it's 3 years from now, but I would say stay the course, keep your eyes on the prize, and just don't forget how bad.
I love that. And I'm glad you mentioned Pac because I have a game to end out the podcast.
Okay.
I heard you mention that New Edition was your people's. So I have a 90s R&B group, this or that. And I'm basically gonna say a group versus a group, and you choose the group, and we'll see
Okay.
how it goes. All right. New Edition or Boys to Men?
Ooh, new edition.
Whoo. New Edition
Yeah.
or Jodeci? That was a quick one too. But people been hating on Boys to Men lately. I feel like Boys to Men has been getting some hate lately. It's kind of
So
crazy.
I actually really I when they did the concert together, I was very hyped because I love seeing them in the same space because I think it gave people a different appreciation. I've always loved Boys and Men, but I feel like a lean towards New Edition. New Edition or Jodeci? Ooh, ooh.
Yeah.
I might have to go old school Jodeci. Like, ooh,
Mm.
yeah. I know most of my friends will be like, "What?" But
Go for
yes,
Jodeci? Okay.
yes.
Jodeci or Drew Hill?
Oh, come on. Ugh. Uh, ah, dang it. I'll say Jodeci.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jodeci or 112?
Oh, come on. Ooh, I might go 112. I
Why?
really
Why
like
112? Mm.
I like 112.
112 or Jagged Edge?
My goodness. Come on, sir. It's not fair.
There's some
Um,
legendary groups. It makes you
I
realize how many
know.
legendary groups there are.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go Jagged Edge. Jagged Edge.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Jagged Edge or Blackstreet?
Blackstreet.
Mm,
Yeah.
Blackstreet or SWV?
SWV.
SWV or Escape?
Ooh. SWV.
Mm,
Ooh.
SWV or TLC? This is a good one.
My
I'm
goodness.
interested with this one.
I'm gonna say SWV.
Okay, SWV is winning now. Okay.
Yeah.
SWV or In Vogue?
In Vogue. Love In Vogue.
It sounded like he was waiting on that one. He was waiting on In Vogue. All right. SWV or Destiny's Child? No, sorry, In Vogue. Sorry, In Vogue or Destiny's Child. My fault. You said
In
In
Vogue.
Vogue.
Mhm. Mhm.
In Vogue or Tony. Last one.
Tony.
That's the winner. Tony is the winner. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Tracy.
Thank you
This
for
was
having me.
amazing. Man, your story's inspiring.
Oh,
Just from your story about you saying you writing 2 books in 1 year. I feel like a lot of people look at authors or anybody in these spaces and they see the name and they think, oh, this person must be like doing this for 15, 20 years. And they don't know that this is just somebody who took a chance. And I feel like that's
literally.
inspiring to people who are probably facing a new thing and feeling like I'm not good enough. And hearing your story, hearing your journey is amazing. So thank you for sharing that.
Try not to block my own blessings, and I encourage everyone else to
Yeah,
do the same.
good. I like that. That might just be the name of the podcast. This one might just be named Don't Block Your Own Blessings. Thank you so much, Tracy, for being
Thank you for
on.
having me.
Of course. This has been The Whole Lawyer.